I'll be attempting to survive an entire week inside of one of Project Zomboid's most dangerous locations, the Rosewood Prison. You might be asking yourself, what makes this part of the map so dangerous?
Oh my.
That much would soon become obvious. Anywhere within the square of the prison is fair game, and my only goal is to simply survive 7 consecutive nights. Other than that, there are no rules. Another thing I should mention is that this wasn't even my first attempt. I've attempted this challenge 13 separate times, each time failing within the first day or so. So with that said, I confirmed my traits, created my character, and began my first day. Starting off day 1, I woke up in my prison cell with 3 zombies immediately trying to take my life. I'd spawned in with a sledgehammer, so I wasn't completely defenseless and I was able to fight back. But since they had spawned directly in front of me, I had sustained a pretty hefty laceration on my upper torso, which would not only cause me debilitating pain, but would also literally never heal. Despite my unlucky start, one of the zombies had happened to have a prison key on them, which meant that I wouldn't have to loudly bust down every single door in my path off its hinges. Now, I could freely explore the facility without having to worry about any locked doors. And once I had left the main prison block, things had started to quiet down relatively quickly. The halls were completely empty for the time being, but soon the hundreds of zombies locked within a total of 104 prison cells would break free. Once I had reached the end of the hallway, I entered the prison guard locker room, where a fair chunk of decent gear could be found, including lunchboxes, police armor, and a duffel bag. I didn't realize it at the time, but the lunchboxes I had found would prove to be the most valuable loot to come from that room. After trying on all my new gear, I snacked on some potato chips and I moved on. Time was extremely limited, as within the next in-game hour, the zombies in both prison blocks would break out of their cells and flood the hallways. When that inevitably happens, I'll be forced into hiding, as fighting wouldn't really be a viable option. With that in mind, I decided my next goal would be to find a safe area to rest before things got too out of hand. One thing that I learned from my previous attempts was that the upstairs was much safer and more manageable than the downstairs, so that's where I set my sights. The first door I entered was some sort of infirmary, which had an abundance of medical supplies. More importantly, it had a sink. And a sink meant that I would have an unlimited supply of water. The infirmary seemed like a suitable location to make my base. It had unlimited water, good quality beds to sleep on, and there was only one entrance, which made it really easy to defend. So I took note of the location and filled my pockets with as many band-aids as I could fit. That was until things started to go wrong. Oh no. That is the last thing I wanted. The alarm brought some zombies to my location, but I was able to take care of them before things got too out of hand. So for the next several hours, I spent my time killing whatever zombies I could, until for a brief moment the horde had let up, allowing me to quickly loot everything I had earned and make my way back towards the infirmary. Among my spoils, I found a few key items: a denim shirt, some overalls, and military boots, which was a substantial armor upgrade. I also picked up a digital watch, which would assist me in keeping track of how many days it had been since the start of the challenge. After things had finally settled down, I did some push-ups, enjoyed a plain peanut butter sandwich with a jelly donut, and went to sleep for a single hour. Apparently, it's very hard to sleep for any significant amount of time when your downstairs neighbors are repeatedly smashing every window and breaking down every door in the entire building. So I splashed some cold water in my face and decided to loot the few rooms I hadn't been to yet. I found a break room just down the hallway that had a working microwave and a refrigerator, which meant that I could cook food whenever I got hungry instead of just eating it raw. I also found a working radio, which would help me drown out the constant sound of shattering glass and violent banging I experienced throughout the night. Afterwards, I head back to my room and I finally tried to get some good quality sleep. This time, I slept for not even 10 minutes. Eventually, I gave up and listened to Kentucky radio until 6 in the morning, before becoming so tired that I basically passed out. Unsurprisingly, I didn't wake up until 1 in the afternoon the next day. So on the beginning of day 2, I decided to explore the rest of the upstairs in attempts to locate a good source of food. The lunchboxes I had collected the day prior only contained potato chips and baked desserts, of which I only had one chocolate donut left. There weren't many good places to find sustenance in the prison, other than the processed snack foods that would only hold me off for a few hours at a time. There was, however, lots of dry ramen. Dry ramen is a terrible source of nutrition until you cook it, but we could take advantage of the microwave in the break room and have enough food to sustain me for at least the next few days. And after fiddling with the microwave trying to understand how to get it to turn on for longer than I would like to admit, I had finally realized that the power had gone out in the middle of the night as I slept. In Project Zomboid, the power can randomly shut off anytime between the start of the first day and the end of the first month, meaning all the ramen that I had meticulously collected had instantaneously become completely useless. At this point, I had no idea if I was going to finish the challenge. Without food or electricity, the challenge became significantly harder. I would have to venture deeper into the prison if I planned to last the full 7 days. Despite that, I thoroughly explored the rest of the upper level in search of any food I had missed. And luckily, I came across a mini fridge packed with veggies and fruits, as well as an entire ham. These foods were only basic ingredients and barely provided any reasonable amount of calories, except for the ham. So while it looked like a good supply, it was only enough to last me another day or so. I had already spent the majority of the day dealing with stray zombies and looking for food scraps, so I held off doing anything too desperate for the next morning. I swapped my trusty sledgehammer out for a crowbar, as swinging around a massive hammer took a lot of energy, and I spent the rest of the day baiting out zombies from the downstairs, taking them to a dark corner where no zombies could hear, and shattering their heads against the tile floor. This turned out to be a sufficient way to slowly clear the lower hallways, so I repeated this process a few more times until I had grown too tired to stand, and at that point, I decided to end the night early. Starting off day 3, I knew that I had to do something about my food supply, so I devised a plan. I knew that the cafeteria was going to be my best bet to stock up on enough food for the remaining days. The only problem was, the cafeteria was all the way on the opposite side of the prison. I would have to fight my way through a massive horde if I wanted to somehow make it to the cafeteria. But with some clever thinking, I could avoid going downstairs altogether. First, I would need some important items, so I started revisiting all the rooms I had already looted. I collected 3 jumpsuits, ripped them up into sheets, and I grabbed some nails from a nearby supply closet. With everything I had collected, I could craft an escape rope. This would allow me to rappel down from the roof into the cafeteria, and from there I could sneak into the kitchen. The only thing left to do was to clear out the remaining zombies from the top floor. Oh no. Yikes. Alright, we're gone. We are gone. The zombies had quickly become too much to handle. My only option was to abandon the safe zone I had created and carry out with the plan. Closing the door behind me, I had managed to temporarily escape the horde. Now, there was only one way forward. I smashed the cafeteria window, and I nailed on my escape rope. Okay. Let's go. Entering the cafeteria, there was fortunately very few zombies to worry about. I managed to sneak past and climb through a window leading into the back room. From there, I had made it into the kitchen. Here, I could find an abundance of canned food, cooking utensils, and fresh fruit. I took my time filling my duffel bag with as much non-perishable food as I could carry, and after finding a can opener, I had everything I needed. But of course, at the worst possible moment, I heard a familiar sound. Alright. What do we got here? Again? Let's get out of here. As I was leaving, I turned around to see that a massive horde was now pouring out of the building from the area which I had left, telling me that I had left at a good time. Now that I was no longer constricted to the tight corridors of the prison, I could easily escape the crowd by sprinting around the entire building. Once I had made my way around to the eastern prison yard, I could re-enter the prison through the back exit. Alright, perfect. The building I had now entered was relatively clear of zombies. Heading upstairs, I found myself wandering into one of the most important rooms in the entire prison, the armory. Alright, let's see what we got. M14, some magazines. Inside the many weapon lockers, there contained enough guns and ammunition to start and finish the American Civil War. The only problem was, I couldn't shoot a single bullet without attracting the full attention of every zombie in the entire prison. Owning a firearm was still a huge advantage, however. Since my inventory was still full of canned food, I decided to leave everything where it was for the time being. In a room nearby, there were a few good quality beds for me to rest on, but I wasn't exactly safe. Since it was in the same building as the prison's armory, that meant that every room was heavily alarmed. If a siren were to go off in the middle of the night while I slept, I would wake up with potentially hundreds of zombies surrounding me. Despite the risks, I had to sleep there for the night, so I ate some canned food and I called it a night. On day 4, I decided it would be best if I left as soon as I could. I went over to the armory and I grabbed an M14 to take with me. With my remaining space, I grabbed as much ammunition as I could carry. And just as I had almost finished looting, an alarm had gone off once again, forcing me to quickly relocate. I hopped down from the roof and I started to weigh my options. My main priority was to find a new safe space to stay, and at this point, there weren't many good options left. I decided to check out one of the guard towers on the outskirts of the prison, but first I would need to lead the zombies outside the towers to somewhere where they can't bother me. So I baited them through the main parking lot area to just inside the first fence. This way I wouldn't have to worry about any finding their way to my tower. With the zombies relocated, I sprinted back around the fence and I made my way to what would be my new home. As long as I could keep the majority of the horde away from my front door, sleeping here shouldn't be too much of a problem. The building was, however, alarmed as well, and in its current state, I couldn't risk spending multiple nights here. But for the time being, it was my only option. Now that I had a relatively safe space to rest, I needed to prioritize. My current highest priority was to collect some more water, at least enough to last me for 3 more days. I was down to half a bottle, and given that there weren't any sinks other than the ones inside the prison, I would need to plan back to head in one last time. So, for the rest of day 4, I did my nightly ritual of eating canned food and exercising before heading to bed for the night. On the night of day 4, I was lucky enough to avoid tripping any alarms as I slept. However, at this point, I had virtually no water left, which meant that I had to act quickly. When I left the tower in the morning, I noticed that some zombies had wandered back into the area, so before heading out, I baited what zombies I could away from the tower. That way, I could ensure that I would have an easy route back. I also made sure to shout directly in front of the main entrance. This way, I could bring all the zombies from inside the prison outside into the yard. Doing this had attracted a massive horde, which meant that the hallways inside should be mostly clear. Once I was sure I was far enough away, I sprinted back away from the horde into the building. Heading back into the prison, things were much quieter than they once were. That was until I got a little deeper into the prison. Ooh, tripped. Barely making past the horde, I had to sprint upstairs where I knew there'd be a quiet room where I could rest. Once I had made it upstairs, I made my way to the nearest sink and I filled all my water bottles up as much as I could. There were a few more items that I wanted to grab before I left the prison. I grabbed the sledgehammer I'd left behind from earlier in the video, a few nails, and several prison jumpsuits. Afterwards, I decided it would be safest if I left through the roof of the building. But since I was in a hurry, I came very close to almost ending the challenge from one simple mistake. I ran all the way around the building through the prison yard, baited the few zombies away from the tower I was resting in, and I went back inside. Finally, I had enough food and water to survive way beyond the 7-day requirement. However, I still had a glaring problem. The tower's alarm could still go off at any moment, but I had thought a few steps ahead. First, I used a sledgehammer to break open the tile of the floor. Next, I smashed the window adjacent to it and picked up all the broken glass. Using the jumpsuits I had picked up while searching for water, I ripped them up and crafted another sheet rope. With all that out of the way, I broke the staircase leading up to the top floor, ascended up the rope, and removed it from behind me. With all that done, I had essentially created a one-way entrance to the top of the tower, which nullified the threat of the alarm attracting any zombies up the stairs into my resting area. That also meant I could use my packed away M14 risk-free, which is exactly what I did. For the final 48 hours, I enjoyed canned beans while killing zombies for sport, which turned out to be extremely cathartic. And then eventually, I had shot my final bullet. Now, I could head downstairs and surrender myself to the horde. This challenge turned out to be a lot harder than I made it look, so if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like to give me that little boost in the algorithm. Alright, see ya!